Okay, so for number 1, it tells us to factor it. So I make my t-chart. We need to find the two numbers. This is a 1, so that multiply to, so 1 times negative 36. So it's multiplying to negative 36, and it's adding to the middle, which is 16. So I look for numbers that multiply to 36. I'm thinking 6 and 6, 2 and 18 potentially. And I want the ones that pretty much have a difference of 16. I can get 16 out of it. And 2 and 18 are going to be those numbers if I think difference. But it needs to multiply to a negative 36. In order for it to multiply to a negative 36, one of these numbers has to be negative. So I'm going to try both. I'm going to have a negative 2 and a positive 18, and a positive 2 and a negative 18. Which ones add to positive 16? If you look, this would add to negative 16. These two would add to positive 16, so it's going to be this top one. Okay, so let's go back in. We're going to take those numbers and we're going to go back over here to factor it out. I'm going to put x minus 2, x plus 18. And in this case, this was a 1, so I don't have to do anything else. That's it, done. Number 2, same thing. They want us to factor. The number in front is a 1. So I'm just going to say, okay, what two numbers multiply to positive 96? And what numbers add to the middle, which is negative 28? So let me think. I'm doing numbers that multiply to 96. I just divide it by different numbers in my calculator. In this case, I end up with 4 times 24 after working with it a little bit. It has to multiply to a positive 96. So they're either both positive or they're both negative. In this case, which one adds to the negative 28? It's going to be the bottom one. So I'm going to work it back over here and factor this. I have x minus 4, x minus 24. And that's me for number 2. Okay, just a little bit of a refresher from Algebra 1. We have difference of 2 squares. So this is something when we end up seeing something like x squared minus 16 potentially, where I say, okay, in this case, what makes up this a? Well, this a is just x. That's kind of easy to see over here. It's x squared. Difference because it's subtraction. How do I make up 16? Has to be something squared. I know this is one of my perfect squares because it's 4 squared. So in this case, I have an a value of x, a b value of 4, and I just factor it out by following the list that I have. So here, this is going to factor out to, it's a plus b, so x plus 4, a minus b, so x minus 4. And that's what you'd have. So pretty much you're kind of thinking, what do I get for it to be its square root? So here would be 4, here would be x. Looking at actual examples of this, let's look at number 3 real quick. So on here, what I have is x squared minus 64. I think in my head, is this a difference of squares? I already see that there's no b term, so this could be possible. Is this going to be able to replicate a squared minus b squared? In this case, I already know 64 is, we know 8 times 8 gives me 64. However, over here, we have x squared. Yep, that would work. I have an a value because of the fact that this would be x squared minus 8 squared. I have an a value of x. I have a b value of 8. And I just factor this out. I'm given the difference of squares is going to be a plus b, a minus b. So I'm going to go, okay, x plus 8x minus 8. Let's look at one that is a little bit trickier because it has a term in front of the x squared. Well, I'm still thinking, I have a subtraction sign here, so I'm thinking difference, squares. Well, let's look. 1 is squared. It actually is, because it's 1 times 1. So in this case, I might have, so let's look. What could I break this into? Well, I already said this could be 1 squared. So I already know my b term here is going to be 1. The a is going to be a little trickier. What can I get to do 9x squared? A lot of you know it's just going to be x in here, but make sure this 9, think the square root of it, it's a 3, because when I square this, I'd get 9x squared. So this is perfect. I have my a value of 3x. I have my b value of 1. So let's go into the equation that I have. It's a plus b, a minus b. So I'm going to have a plus b, a minus b. Okay, so for number 5, I see it looks a little bit different, mainly because there's a term in front of the x squared that isn't 1, like all the other ones that we've worked with so far. So this is potentially divide and slide, but let me see. There's a possibility that there is a greatest common factor that I can take out. So let me see if there's a greatest common factor that goes into all of these. So I have a 4 here, I have a 4 here, so I'm thinking maybe I can take out 4. Does 4 go into 80? Yes, it goes into it 20 times. So I'm going to factor out a 4 before I do anything. So put the 4 on the outside and see what's left over. I have x squared plus, that would just be 1x, minus 20. Can't do anything with the 4 as of right now. However, I look inside, I can factor this. Let me make my t-chart. We need to find the numbers that multiply. That's 1 times negative 20. So multiply to negative 20 and add to the middle, which in this case is a 1. So I'm thinking the two numbers for 20 or negative 20, probably 5 and 4. So let's just check. 5 times 4, they have a difference of 1. If it's a negative 20, one of these has to be negative. So let's look. Which one of these choices would add up to a positive 1? That would be a negative 1. This one would be a positive 1. So this is the one that I'm going to be working with right now. I'm going to go back over there and break this down. Keep the 4 in front, but this thing breaks up just like it did in all of the other problems right before it. This is going to be an x plus 5 and x minus 4. That's your solution. You can't forget that 4 in front. So that's its factored form. Moving on to this one, same thing. It's a little different because I have this number in front. Let's see if I'm able to take out the 2 like I was in that last problem. So 2 goes into here. There's just a negative 1. 2 doesn't go into negative 1 evenly. So here's going to be the case where you have to divide and slide. So let's make a box around this number because this is going to be super important for us. What we're going to do by dividing and sliding is I'm going to multiply it into my numbers, and then at the end, I'm going to divide it out. So here, usually this was a 1 in front, so I'd say in my t-chart it multiplies to negative 28, but it isn't in this case. It's 2. So you multiply those 2. So what do I get when I multiply 2 times negative 28? I get a negative 56. So it has to multiply to negative 56, and it still just adds to the middle. In this case, it's going to be a negative 1. So I work around with the numbers, see if there's things that multiplied negative 56. In this case, I automatically kind of think 7 and 8. And in this case, it does work. So it's going to multiply to a negative 56, so one of these has to be negative. Let's look. Which of these adds to negative 1, though? Is going to be this one, the bottom one. So I go back over here, just like it's my normal problem. and I break it up. I get x plus 7, x minus 8. But here's the thing. Because I multiplied in the 2, I now need to divide out the 2. So I'm going to divide each of these by that 2. I look over here. Can it be simplified at all, or can it go evenly into it? Neither of those options. So what I'm going to do is, because I divided it, now I'm going to slide it because it doesn't go in to that perfectly. Here, does 2 go into -8? Absolutely. It goes into it -4 times. That's my answer. So that's divide and slide. So these ones just have a little bit of different directions. Before they all said factor. This one's going to be different. It says solve for x. Now here's the thing. We're still probably going to have to factor them out in order to solve for x since we're doing factoring review. Let's look. I have an x squared term, an x term, and a constant. They're not going to be canceling each other out. So I'm probably going to have to factor. So let me move this 135 to the other side. So I'm going to subtract 135, subtract 135. Cancels out over here. I get x squared plus 6x minus 135 equals 0. I'm now set up to be able to factor this thing out. I'm set equal to 0. This is perfect. So let me make my t-chart. I have to find out what multiplies to -135 and adds to the middle, which is 6. So thinking about things that multiply to -135, I started out with 4, didn't work, started out with a lot of numbers that would give me the difference of 6, and I finally found 9 and 15. Now here's the thing, it's negative, so one of these has to be negative, so let's either try -9 and +15 or +9 and -15. Which one adds to the +6? In this case, it's going to be the top one. So I go over here and I break this up. I get x minus 9, x plus 15 equals 0. Don't forget that equals 0. Now I'm able to solve this because these are multiplied together and set equal to 0. I can now break each of these up by saying, okay, x minus 9 equals 0. X plus 15 equals 0. So I just took both of them, set them equal to 0. Add 9 on both sides, I get x equals +9. Subtract 15 on both sides, I get x equals -15. Those are your answers. So that's the difference. Had it just said factor, I would have left it like that. However, it didn't. It said solve, so I found x's. Looking at number 8, let's move everything over. I want to keep this x squared term positive. It'll be easier for me. So I'm going to move everything this way. I'm going to subtract x first, subtract x. Those cancel, leaving me with x squared minus 10x equals 24. And we're going to move that 24 over. I get x squared minus 10x minus 24 equals 0. I'm going to have to factor here. I have an x squared, I have an x, and I have a constant. So let me make my t-chart. 1 in front, so it just multiplies to -24, adds to -10. Start working with the numbers. This one tricked me up a little bit because at first I was like, okay, 6 times 4 adds up to 10, but it doesn't work because one had to be negative, one had to be positive. What does work here is 2 and 12. One's negative, so let's try both. In this case, which one adds to a -10? It's going to be this one. It's the one where the negative is the greater amount. So in this case, I'm going to break this up. I'm going to say x plus 2, x minus 12. I can now set each equal to 0. So I'm going to do that over here, that over here. X plus 2 equals 0, x minus 12 equals 0. Subtract 2, I get x equals -2. Add 12, I get x equals 12. That's that problem. Number 9 is a really cool problem. I really like this one because it's not set up like the other ones are. This one, before I actually do anything, I have to FOIL it out. So take this side and FOIL it out. So I get x squared minus 4x plus x minus 4 equals 6. Now, let's combine our like terms. I get x squared minus 3x minus 4 equals 6. And simply add that, or subtract that 6 to the other side. So I get x squared minus 3x minus 10 equals 0. At this point, I can now factor this out. So make my t-chart, what it multiplies to. So this is a 1 in front, so it just multiplies to negative 10. It adds to negative 3. What multiplies to 10? You're kind of already probably thinking 5 and 2. This is a negative, so one of these has to be negative. You want negative 3, so we're going to pick this one because that's the one that adds to negative 3. I'm going to break this up. I have x minus 5, x plus 2. What am I going to do at this point? Set each equal to 0. I get x minus 5 equals 0, x plus 2 equals 0. Add 5. I get x equals positive 5. Subtract 2. I get x equals negative 2. Those are my answers. Last one, probably my favorite in this whole thing. It's solve for x. It says 2x squared equals 3x plus 9. I have an x squared term, I have an x term, and I have a constant. Yet again, probably factoring. However, I want to keep this x squared term positive, so I'm going to move these things over to this side. So let's subtract 3x first. I get 2x squared minus 3x equals 9. Subtract 9. I get 2x squared minus 3x minus 9 equals 0. I'm able to factor this. The issue here is we have a 2 in front. I want to see if the 2 potentially is the greatest common factor that I can just take out. So 2 would come out of here, but it wouldn't come out of either of these. So that's not going to work. So instead, what I'm going to have to do is divide and slide. So let's put a square around that 2. The number in front of the x squared is going to be super important if we're dividing and sliding. We're first going to multiply it in, and at the end, we're going to divide it out. So this is going to multiply in my t-chart, not to negative 9, but to negative 9 times 2. So in this case, we have multiplying to negative 18, and it's still just adding to the middle, which is a negative 3. Looking at that, 18, just break up the numbers, 6 and 3 ends up working. It's a negative 18, so one has to be negative, one has to be positive. And which of these adds to negative 3? Need that 6 to be the negative one. So let's go over here, just like before, and break it up. So I have x minus 6, x plus 3. I'm not done. I can't just set these equal to 0. The reason is because I multiplied by 2, I now have to divide by 2. So divide by 2, divide by 2. Over here, this ends up being x minus 3. However, over here, it's not going to go evenly. I checked to see if I can simplify it first because I would have to do that. 3 divided by 2, nothing comes out, okay? So I'm going to slide it in there, and I'm going to get 2x plus 3 equals 0, okay? This is important that you set each equal to 0. I have x minus 3 equals 0, 2x plus 3 equals 0. And I solve each, solve there, x equals 3, minus 3, minus 3. I get 2x equals negative 3. Divide by 2, divide by 2. I get x equals negative 3 over 2. I'm going to leave it like that. Okay, that's it.